There are two segments that we target. So the first group are those parents that are really going through it right now. We talk about being an imposter in your own home, feeling like you don't have what it takes, that you're not measuring up, and you're kind of faking it till you make it. And we really want to encourage you to go from imposter to incredible, to be the best parent you could be. And we our core message is you already have what it takes. You have within you what it takes to be an amazing parent. We hope to give you some insights to draw that out. But the second group, John, it's those parents that are looking to maximize. Things are going well, but they know there's more. They know there's more sync up that they can have with their partner. They know that there's greater opportunity to continue to become best version of themselves as dad or mom, and really rock those roles. So we've seen two really strong points. I think not knowing 18 months ago that we'd be in the middle of a pandemic when the book came out, we seem to find more of the folks that are really hurting right now. They need that boost of confidence. They need resources. So we're definitely sensitive to that, hoping to meet some of those needs.
Yeah, I think it's perfect timing. I mean, no greater moment in history for this book to land in someone's lap when everyone has been thrust into a role of parenting that was likely not on their plan for the last 12 months. And I'm sure that there's been a lot of moments where a parent, I mean, I've heard people say, this was a great opportunity. I learned a lot about myself and my kids, and I stepped up. I also heard an equal amount, if not greater amount of, I didn't realize how deficient I was in this area of being resourceful enough to be a homeschool teacher or just a more involved parent than they were. I think that for a lot of us entrepreneurs, we'd like to outsource things. And a lot of the outsourcing went away, a lot of the activities that our kids were in. So we were all of a sudden responsible for, creating these experiences that maybe was a muscle that was atrophied for a lot of parents. So this is hitting at the perfect time. I really love it. Les, let's ask you, man. You're the newest addition to the team, I think is safe to say. Let's just talk a little bit about how you got connected to this book project. Walk us through a little bit of the history and why you were a all-in heck yes to the mission here behind Incredible Parent.
Well, I mean, I want Brandon to restate what he said earlier because it was just so nice. I mean, I won't say the situation.
No, we missed all the buildup. Nice things said about Les. That's right.
No. Honestly, what it boils down to for me was we went to the Front Row Dad retreat in September. I showed up and Brandon was one of the speakers, and I just happened to be at a point where I was done with my real estate career, trying to find a way out. And we talked, and what he spoke, and I was so into the whole notion of, man, I could totally see how making this the focus for how I take my inspirational messages, if you will, into a very focused point. And after that conversation, it was like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden a whirlwind. It was that night he's telling me, hey man, you should join our team, not just be a coach, but you should join us and become one with us. And I'm like, let's do it. And the symmetry between us, the way that we align in our strengths is kind of been mind blowing. It's that in and of itself was really profound for me to just I had just taken the Clifton strengths, or went back and looked at him after he had done his little discussion about, what he does in our lunch meeting. And it was like, oh my goodness, I'm like this. I could see my cog fitting into the wheel for the first time in a very long time. Yeah. So it was pretty amazing to see that play out. And then on top of that, just the way that they have aligned and created this unbelievable assessment. My wife and I got to sit down with a coach. Coach Kelly she's really, really great. And she just blew me away, and she basically just said, well, this is why you do this, and this is why you do that, and this is how you guys work together. I'm like, why couldn't I have had this like 10, 15 years ago when I was getting started with the hard stuff, But and it just made me say, I want other parents to have access to this. This is so important, and this is how we're going to change the world. Without question, leadership will be derived from the home. That's the only place it will be derived. It can't come from somewhere else. It can come from parent-like people, but ultimately you've got to be able to have someone there who's guiding you in that to that place. And so, what better place to do it than with a company called Incredible Family? I mean, really, that's amazing. So.
And Brandon has some qualifications, and so do you, in the sense of like you both have traveled down this parenting path for quite a while. Between the two of you, 11 kids, right? Grandkids, and quite a bit of experience coupled with humility, though. You're both strong learners. You both realize that some of your biggest breakthroughs are happening now. Brandon, I remember at the retreat, you had a breakthrough. You had a moment. There was a experience that you shared with the men, which you could share it if you wanted to. I don't want to reveal things for you, but it was like you shared a message that you got from one of your children. And I remember that, like the chills that I had. I was like, here's a guy with grown kids, children of all ages, and you're having these incredible breakthroughs as a father. I really honor you both for that. Let's talk a little bit about, let's just get into the book itself. I want to get into the actual promise in the book and why this was written and what this book does. So for anybody who's watching the video, there it is, Incredible Parent. It's the perfect size book. I should add that. You open it up, it's got this beautiful assessment right at the very start, which I think is great because it tells you about yourself. And then it breaks down all these strengths. And Brandon, maybe I'll go to you on this one. Is like first of all, you take the assessment, you learn what your strengths are, and hopefully I want to ask you guys some questions about my strengths a little bit later in the show, because I've got my results here. I took the test, as did all the guys at the retreat. But Brandon, talk to us a little bit about once the guy knows their strengths and they take the assessment. It's pretty quick, right? 15 minutes to do the assessment.
The average are hearing is 10 minutes.
What are they reading about then in the book, right? Because I see that each one is like a chapter says, hey, if you tested high in this, if this is a strength of yours, this is what it means. Tell us what they're going to read about in those chapters.
Yeah, we really wanted to make this more than just a book on the theory, concept, and principle. So that the first 70 pages are just that. It's going to cover the concept of strengths-based parenting, the construct around it. It gives you some really great, insightful takeaways of just how to think this way, and then it tees you up into the second half of the book, where it's really a resource library. It's where you can take the results from your Incredible Parent assessment, and then you can dive in, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. So for example, when we look at John's number one, which is inspiration, so you get the page with the rocket on it, but then you start to turn those pages and you get into, all right, so here's what inspiration sounds like for you. Go through and mark that up. Yep, that's me, because you got to validate this assessment yourself. But then we get into, here's how inspiration's at its best. Here's where it struggles. And we love the section on meeting kids' needs. When we did our research around what do our children need from us, we came with 5. They need our love, they need our structure, they need our trust, correction, and they need us to give them hope. And so you're going to be able to look at, all right, how do I use my inspiration to meet these needs? And then I think part of my personal favorite, just by experience, is then you can start to read about how do you partner with someone with strengths, especially when they're very different from yours, and start to really dig in. So the resource section of the book, I think, is something we're very proud of, because we feel like we've given a gift that can keep on giving, something that you can come back to, you can look at, and the size is not a large book, so you can keep it handy. Great little handbook for being the best dad, best parent you could be.
Although he did say it would fit in the back pocket. I don't have any back pockets in this thing. I don't know about that. But
bigger back pockets, so it fits in mine just fine.
That's right. Brandon, now that you've had people take this assessment and you've had the feedback start rolling in, have you noticed that between a traditional husband and wife team, let's say, and there's lots of different variations of parenting between same-sex couples or single parents, obviously, everyone can benefit from this book. But when I think about what your data shows, do you find that a lot of the parents have the same strengths? Are they kind of attracted to people with the same strengths, or are they just radically different? Or is there no rhyme or reason to it?
It's very interesting. So my wife and I have very different top strengths. So she's an organizer and I'm a trainer. And both of our top strengths are the opposite person's lower strengths. So not our number 12, I think it's 11 for both of us. So we're very opposite. But our number 2 inspiration is the same. But so what makes that interesting is her inspiration leads into organization. My inspiration leads into training. So we have versions of inspiration that, though there's an underlying relationship about how we both love to inspire our kids, we both get behind them, we're great cheerleaders, we love to encourage, but in the home, when we are in inspiration mode, we're going to look at different things, we're going to focus in different areas. So we're often seeing that reality. I don't know that I've met a couple yet that didn't have some kind of opposite pairing that they could learn about, which makes it so fascinating to just start to respect and appreciate. I heard one person say, I think you just solved a 10-year argument between my wife and I, because I now realize, oh my gosh, this thing that you were doing that I would just find so challenging, you're just being you. You're just, that's your parenting strength. And I need to step back and respect that that's where you're gonna come from now.
One of the things I love about assessments like this is that it just reminds us that we're all different. Like ultimately that we're all different, and it gives us a common language. It's like you said, there's a reason why you do that. So when I show this to my wife, she's like, I get it now. Like why you're always trying to give the kids a pep talk or a motivational speech, or I know why you did the work that you do. And it kind of validates in some way your behavior, or in their mind, maybe even justifies it. Like first it was insane, but now it's just who you are. And I also think what's cool is that it's like a third party saying things that maybe aren't as well received when they're said by a spouse, right. Because it's also not only what your strengths are, but maybe what's not that doesn't rank as high. Like I wouldn't call it a weakness, but maybe it's an underdeveloped strength. What would you refer to
as a weakness?
What would you refer to as my number 12 on the test was stability? What does that say about me?
Well, here's a way to think about the assessment. That the collection of the super 6, we call them the top 6. Those are most likely going to be very core to you, very core, or something you've grown into. That you're going to do these without thought. You're going to show up. This is just how you react. So this is deep neural pathways, and this is where your habitual behaviors will come from. Now, in those super 6, will play great assets and great liabilities at the same time. So in the framework of strength weakness, the most intense can actually cause the greater issue. Now, the other reality is that, and it's the good news we say in the book, is look, you can do all 12. Every one of us can do all 12. We all have these capacities, but some of these are you can learn them and do them, and yeah, that's cool, I can pull that off. But others you try to take on and you just can't ever get past the middle. You can't sustain it. And classically, that could be thought of as a weakness. So a strength is something that I do that at the end of it, I feel energized. I feel strong. We call it the 5 E's to a strength. So it comes easy. I have enthusiasm. I do it with excellence. I enjoy it and it just energizes me. But then others, so stability happens to be my number 12. I can't sustain that. So classically, if something that you do makes you feel weak, it doesn't energize you, that could classically be called a weakness. And therefore, when I compare myself to my partner, Dr. Ryan Darby, who my wife likes to, why can't you be more like Ryan? Because his number 1 is stability. That dude is the calm in the storm, not too high, not too low, just super passionate, friendly guy. And if I were to try to be Ryan for any length of time, I would find that really frustrating because I couldn't pull that. So what we hope when you see that number 12 isn't, oh man, where's mine? It's, well, it's liberating. I don't need to try to be that guy. I can be this guy, the one that comes to me, that these are my core strengths.
Exactly. Les, what did you learn about yourself doing the assessment? And now that you've been able to take the deep dive into this world, Has anything shifted with your parenting strategy or style, or, you know, does it shed light on your history?
It definitely sheds light on my history. Specifically, my number one strength is gracious, and then second, very actually they're the same measurement on the scale, is advisor, and and I found out that my wife's is organizer, and that being her number one and my number one don't always align, if you will, because there is actually hers is fortitude and organizer. So neither one of those really align with gracious and advisor, because she wants it everything in alignment. That she wants to have a plan. She wants to know that there is that we're going to continue down a certain path and stay there. I have been all over the map my entire life. That's just the way I am. Even in this conversation, it will be all over the map. The gracious advisor in me, my first response when my son says, "Oh, I haven't done my homework," is, "Well, you're going to learn." Hers is, "Why isn't there a plan for this?" Well, when that, and then when he gets upset, my gracious, the one that the thing that where I'm like, so like, "Oh yeah, well, he'll learn." And I'm giving away the grace. Well, the number one thing that I want back is grace, and I don't receive that from my wife, well, then that raises up my temper, which then raises up my voice, which then means I'm out of control. And then I'm going after my son for making his mama mad. And it's like, and all of a sudden it was like, now I don't have to do that anymore. Once I was able to see how the system was laid out in my programming, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I see that what I want is to be gracious. I see where she's coming from now, and she doesn't want me to rescue her. She's just telling me what she needs. And then I was able to go, now I can just be more graceful and really exercise that number one for me. It was beautiful. I mean, and I owe that to Kelly telling me this is how this works. And I went, this would have been nice to know. Literally, it's like this would have been nice to know from day one in my marriage, that's how I ultimately lean in. So it has changed a lot.
I feel like in 2020, my wife, well, let me back up for a second. My wife and I did this, this review of our year last night. Our friend Phoebe Morochek has a podcast called Unbecoming. It's a great show. And she did this. She walks her audience through a process of looking back on your year and what went well. And for me, this was a year of great self-awareness. I took a lot of time to be silent, to become more aware of who I am. And this was, I think, a big win for me. So even learning about like the Enneagram was a big win for me. Anything that told me more about who I am and why I do what I do has been arguably the greatest leap forward, if you would call them that. I mean, I really think it's persistently just chipping away, but sometimes it feels like you hit the fast track for a minute and you just take this like leap forward. And then you have that thought of like, dang, why didn't I have access to this 4 years ago or 5 years ago? And you just have to have faith that you got it in the moment that you needed it. And thank goodness you didn't get it 4 years from now, right? And that you got it in this moment. Brandon, for you, it feels like you've been on a tremendous journey yourself of becoming self-aware enough to the point to where you become a teacher, right? Like you learn it, you test it, and then you want to share it with the world. You've built an incredibly successful business with 34 Strong. And now you're, as an experienced parent, right, you are bringing these skills not just to the boardrooms, but into the homes of people who need them. And I'm with you, Les. I think arguably this is the most important place that we can bring our skill set. So talk to us, Brandon, a little bit about that journey for a moment, and talk to us a little bit about how this evolved. Like, why did it evolve? Play to their strengths, now incredible parent. Connect some dots for us about that journey behind the heart here, and also the pathway that you took to get to this place. Because Play to Their Strengths is an incredible book. And I like this, and I think this is a perfect complement to that as well. Just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting when the journey toward our first book began. It was really the encouragement to start to take note of the stories that we were already telling from the stage. So whether it was in the context of business, using the parent reality as an ease into leadership and management. It gave an open forum. Most of your audience can relate to parenting, and then they can start to connect the dots to, oh yeah, professionally, management, leadership, parenting, very similar. It's leadership. And as the stories evolve, because with 7 children, they're good for a lot of stories. There's never a shortage of something to talk about and a way to progress. And so as we started to put them down and catalog them, someone randomly said, you guys should write a book and talk about this approach from the experiential side. So there was some scientific work out there, some great resources around this concept of shifting to a strengths-based approach to parenting. We decided to write the field guide. Here's what it looks like in practice. Here's what it looks like with 2 segments of kids. So we have 3, as John mentioned, that are adults, and at the time we were writing, they were in their teens, and then 3 that were school-age kids, just entering junior high. And so as we began, our goal was let's do this as something we give back to the world, something we give back as a way to say parenting's hard, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so this whole mantra around giving your kids shining eyes as a way to evaluate, how do you know whether you're doing a good job as a parent or not? Look at your kids' eyes. And if you can't see the shine, then you get to ask, who am I being as the parent that those eyes aren't shining? And what can I do to move away from probably I'm frustrated about something they're doing to a fascination with who this kid is? And that mind shift, I'll tell you, it takes work. You got to work at it. But that was the core message around our first book, Play to Their Strengths. And it really captured for us, it was almost like the book we wrote that we didn't know anyone would read, because it really is us. It's our story, it's our faith, it's our philosophy, it's our kids. And it was awesome the way it just converged. So as we got into it, we started to think about how can we equip parents to grow in confidence? Because over and over, as we talked to couples, you would just hear this, I'm not measuring up, I'm not making it. And I so badly wanted to see what we could offer. And so our partnership with Dr. Ryan Darby, we needed a science guy. We needed a person who could think about assessments, helped us to form the strategy around this next book. So they came one after the other, but it's been a build. It's been building. And I think for us, every time we hear from someone, as Les was sharing, you're sharing about just insights, I think that's our reward. We're very excited about this contribution.
I was talking with 2 of our Front Row Dad members, new members yesterday, and both of them referenced this idea that I know both you are each aware of, that I do on a weekly basis, which is take pictures of my kids, and then I write on the back about their strengths, right? I call out their strengths just with a little note. If you happen to be watching on a video, like here's that's Tiger's photo album. And, I never really pieced it together, Brandon, but your book was instrumental in sparking that idea for me to do that. I think your book, sitting with your book, really got me thinking about, as a dad, as a leader in my home, how am I cultivating strengths? I obsess about it at work. We do the assessments. We've done the Clifton. We sat in meetings and talked about, is the right person in the right seat? I mean, Jim Collins brought that to life so well. And yet, as a dad, I didn't put much energy or time into thinking about their strengths or calling out my children's strengths. And the other thing I did not do is I didn't really work to apply what I was learning about myself as a dad, my strengths at home. What's so fascinating to me is I would do all these things at work and put so much energy into it, but yet it wouldn't translate because I didn't have the dialogue around it. I didn't have the men. I didn't have the conversation until now, right? And now it's moving in that direction. And I got to tell you, man, I sleep a lot better at night knowing that I'm doing a better job as a dad. You know what I mean? Because I could justify, like, if I'm going to work and making money, like I can still be like, well, I'm working hard for the family. And that's great, right? If you're out there and you're working hard for your family, props to you.
Keep it up.
But if you're ignoring your family along the way, there should be something gnawing at you. If you're not looking at your strengths as a dad and applying it, or you're not looking at your kids' strengths, it should gnaw at you a little bit. That's appropriate. So I think this is awesome, man. Let's talk about.
Helps
Yeah, good.
you've showed me those photos before, and I think just the fact that you took away a concept and said, what can I practically do that shifts my gaze? So when I'm looking now, when you look at your kids, you're trying to find the right things, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to put something to the picture, and it seems so subtle of a shift with massive impact, because what John's kids are going to remember is that my daddy told me more about what was right with me than he picked on what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
That sticks. And what we're doing is we're launching a generation of kids that are coming out of our homes confident in who they are, not arrogant, not overplaying it, but confident in who they are. And I think we can all agree our world needs people coming out of their homes confidently ready to move forward in this world.
Yeah. Les, from your perspective, what do you hope happens here with the book? Right? Like, so first of all, what do you hope someone hears today for them to be able to say, yes, I need to get this book. Yes, I need to do the assessment. What do you hope happens there? And through their journey. So how does a guy identify himself as like, I need this? How does a guy, what action does he take? And then what's your hope along the way, right? Like what you've got to see, I know you see the dots being connected, right? Because this is part of your role in the company, is getting this out to the world, right? And helping men to implement this. So walk us through the journey of a man right now saying, that's for me, and then here's what I'm going to get from this.
That is a huge path you just for honestly, it's a place where men have to be humbled, I think, to begin that whole journey, to recognize first and foremost that they need help. Um, I think I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was on a call earlier, Brandon, where somebody mentioned that their wife volunteered them for some, to take the assessment or something, and it's like guys need to be able to step up before their wife is saying, you probably should really look at this other thing, because it does need to be something that we are equally, no, more passionate about. Anything that's relational, we should be more passionate about that than anything business wise. um, and so I think it starts there. But where I see this, and I mean, when you asked me the question, I got chill bumps and my eyes started welling up with tears, because it is so vital to our world that we connect as community. It is so vital that unity becomes our focus. And we're always talking about men are the leaders of the home, but we're not leading the way in unity right now. And that's just straight up truth. And we've got to be the ones who start to say it's not about competition, but it's about collaboration. And guys like you and Front Row Dads, and what I think is happening here in the parenting world with Incredible Family and the launch of Incredible Parent, is that we are really seeking a path that is ultimately going to create more unity among one another. In fact, I'd venture to say that the institutions that we have so much faith in have lost sight of this. That the institutions of religion, of politics, they're no longer about really a unifying element. Even and I don't mean that in a cynical way. There are pieces of it, but we're so worried about the system itself that we're forgetting everything that's outside of the walls. Well, when you start going inward personally, and you start really discovering your strengths, and you really start discovering who you are, it empowers you to now stand in front of other people with a different kind of disposition, a different kind of message. And so I foresee this assessment and what is happening here, and beginning to shift what happens in our culture that is so uh, it's divisive. I mean, from the media to the games our kids are playing to the things we hold in our hand all day long that disconnect us. When we can start walking around, and instead of getting onto our kids or getting onto our spouses for the things they're doing wrong, and say, I love it when you, and then you're starting to say different language, create different language about how you see them. When it's that idea of when someone sees that strength in you, you want to do it more. You don't want to do it less. But then what does it, what you focus on expands. So we're going around telling our kids, you're on your phone all the time. Well, then we're going to get more of, you're on your phone all the time. So there is a different way to look at strengths-based living. I mean, I really want to call it that. And I think that is what has been captured here. And of course, this is, born out of Brandon's incredible, his own business, 34 Strong, which is based on Clifton strengths. And pulling from that, he said, like, we could do this, something like this for parents. And he's right. And I think there is a huge amount of science behind this. And Dr. Darby needs to come on here one day too and really describe a lot about this. But the science behind this is phenomenal. I mean, this isn't
Les,
just
hold on real
something
quick
that we
before
just
you
pull
get into
together.
the science. I want to make
I'm
sure
not
that
going down it.
I want
I'm
to
just
make
saying,
sure
we do need to get them.
before you give us a science lesson. No, just kidding. The thing is, I want to make sure I got what you just said, which is great because I've never connected this dot, which is that the concept of unity and strengths. So at first, when you said that, I was having a hard time seeing how unity and strengths tied together, right? Like what's the bridge between them? But what I now see is that, at least it feels this way to me, when I show up with my strengths, I'm more of a bridge builder. I'm more of a team player. I'm better for unity when I bring my strengths. Not that I'm overbearing, all I can be. Not that I'm meant to use my strengths to dominate. This isn't an arm wrestling competition. But that if everybody shows up with their strengths, that's like the chain where everybody's bringing their best link to the, to the system, right? And that's probably not a good analogy because I don't think it's linear that something we're talking about, but more communal. But I see it as like a spoke in the wheel, maybe, that if that's your strength, then the whole thing rolls better. Whenever I'm feeling weak as a dad, and I'm focusing on my weaknesses and I'm focusing on what's missing and where I'm failing, I take that energy and dump it on my family. I hate that. I'm not bragging about it. I'm saying it kills me that I do that.
Yeah.
Right. When I bomb somewhere and my kids feel it, my wife senses it. She's not attracted to that either, by the way. I can tell she's like, that's not a quality I'm really attracted to. My sex life plummets whenever I'm playing a pity party for myself, right? Because she didn't want to marry somebody that just feels sorry for himself all the time. Right. So what I hear from you with unity is I hear that when you show up with strength, when you show up in your power, and when you help your kids play to their strengths and you help your kids, because first of all, you've got to go there first, right? Leaders go there first. So you know yours. And then if you talk about it with your kids, they're probably more likely and receptive to receiving their strengths or to know what that is because you're leading, truly leading. That builds unity. That builds family. That builds connection and bond. And that togetherness, that's what we can do in a world that feels very divided right now, right? Is not to fight against the divisiveness, but just like a global strength, we focus on what we can do, what we're good at, go home and plug in there, right? If you want to change the world, go home and serve your family.
Yes. And the whole premise of enculturation is the idea that everybody's a hammer. And so be a hammer. And some of us are like, I'm not a hammer. And so we find some other pocket and then we become that fits somewhere closer. And then so now we have two parties, if you will, that are out there saying, this is the tool that you use. And this is the tool you use over here. That doesn't work. We've got to be more, there's more than two tools in the box. And that's the same in our household. That's the same in our churches. That's the same in our schools. And everything that we've been taught along the way has been trying to say, this is who you are. And it's a very small focused pinpoint of what it looks like to be a human rather than, no, it's diverse. And when we start doing that, we build a beautiful creation from that. That's where unity is.
Guys, what, if I love asking this question to people who put out books. Think forward 10, 20 years, you get a letter from somebody, right? And just imagine, what does that letter say? What have they reported back that says to you, this book has done what I wanted it to do? I know we've dabbled in this a little bit already, but what does that letter look like? What's happened?
There was a moment at the retreat in Austin where I encouraged the guys to take a minute and to go and talk to 5 guys, and just to convey a message to them that they had what it takes to be an incredible dad. And I wanted to provide a safe space where you could just look a dude in the eye and say you have what it takes. And I'll never forget that we were doing a debrief. You opened up the floor for a debrief. And of all the comments that came, the one that just sunk in my heart was one of the guys saying, I needed to hear that more than I could have ever known. I have felt inadequate in my role. I have felt like I don't have what it takes. I'm just that, you know, and he didn't use these words, but it comes like the dopey dad. I'm just like, yeah, just ask your mom. And I'm just kind of in the background, and, you know, she runs the show. And it was like, no, I do have what it takes. And so if I got a letter 10 years from now with a mom or dad saying, you know, that message that I am incredible, that I am a strong mom, I am a super dad, it changed everything for me, everything for the way my kids and I relay, how my partner and I relay, my spouse, and it launched me forward. And that, I think, for us is over any financial reward, over any gains that we have, those impacts are what we cherish.
I think this is going to be huge. I think the world was waiting for this. I think it's needed. I love it. Brandon, talk to us a little bit about, unless this might be for you too. Either one of you can take this one. As I have a fear of taking an assessment and then getting the results and then not doing anything with it. And the reason I have that fear is because I've done it. People are like, oh, what are your, what's your, pick any assessment. What's your DISC profile? I'm like, I took that 7 years ago. I have no idea. What's your core values index? Yeah, I did that one too. What's your Myers-Briggs? I can't remember. I'm a SNGY. And I'm like, am I the only one that can't remember any of his results from any of his assessments that I've done? I mean, even I did the Enneagram and interviewed Ian Cron, who wrote the book, The Road Back to You. And yet 4 years later, somebody's like, what are you on the Enneagram? And I'm like, can't remember. How do we combat that? What's your plan to combat that with this process?
Yeah, I think I'll take the first stab, Les, and then you can jump in. So I was very early in the Clifton Strengths release. So book came out in early 2000s, and
he's famous in Clifton Strengths, man. I'm just telling you. I just got my certification, and he's famous. Go ahead.
It was very early in the process, and so with the early adopters, what we were running into was, how can we help sustain this if people take an assessment, feel like they did their strengths, and then they just move on with their life? That doesn't actually cause it to stick. And so Gallup recognized in their own internal organizational effort, which is great and profound, and they do good work, they were limited. And so what they decided to launch was, we got to have partners. We got to have people out there that are carrying the message, that are passionate about this, and they're going to go into corners and places that we could never have dreamed. And so to date, they've certified 15,000 plus coaches. They're having a global impact. It's so cool to meet people all over the world that are thinking this way. And so for us, that I don't need to write a new play. We know that for this to really stick, for someone to really have a positive impact, we're going to need coaches. And so a big part of our reach here is to also certify people that can take this assessment, help parents relate to it, as Les was describing what Kelly did for he and Heatherly, just to bring it to life and to show that application. So that's a big piece of where I feel like we're watching momentum shift and how it sticks. Because I just talked to a mom the other day, and she took the assessment and she said, I'm like all 12 of these. And I said, oh, that's interesting. She had written this to me. And I said, I don't know if that's possible, but I would love to hear your story. So we happened to both be available for a few minutes to connect. And so this is the mom who's raised 2 adult daughters and fostered 24 teenage girls.
Oh.
24. I said, well, you have a unique experience, and it's very likely you have absolutely needed all 12 of these at different times. And you have learned how to do this. What an amazing story in a way. And she goes, oh my gosh, it was so helpful to someone else give it back to me. So then I know now which ones of these really are most natural, which ones I had to bring in because I had to have them. So that reality of that message, everyone needs a coach, is a big part of this.
Les, you have thoughts you want to add to that?
I mean, ultimately, I just think it comes down to something even you mentioned earlier, and that is that in Front Row Dads, we're talking about how we can make this more of a partnership with you guys, and the more we can create those kinds of partnerships, and then it's something that it's not just, hey, we're taking this assessment, but we're taking this assessment, and then we're going to continually feed you back your strengths to empower you. And because you're right, there's a lot of people who could just happen to be looking up, strengths for parents or whatever, and then they land on our website, they go on, they can take the assessment and then do nothing with it. Well, the onus is on us at that point to actually find ways to create that community for them to constantly being fed back that this is what your strength does for you, because as long as it's at the front of mind, I think that's what has to happen. Is we just have, I mean, I can't go back. The only thing I can really relate it to is what's negative right now in our world, and it's everybody's on the news and they're being fed fear all day long. And so it's no surprise that everybody's afraid. It's no surprise that everybody is wondering, well, should I or should I not wear a mask? And people are up buying guns because they're afraid that there's going to be riots, and like all of those things. There's no question. If the news was good, nobody's buying guns. Nobody's going out worried about, is somebody going to break in my home? So our message has to get louder than what's already out there. And so that's really the big question, is how loud can we get, and how many partners can we get that shout this first and foremost? It doesn't have to be our assessment. It's just strengths. How quickly can we move from this negative notion to we are good? I mean, from my tradition and religion, the Christian tradition, I am very good according to the creation story. Why can't we be right there all the time? And a lot of this stuff goes away with that. So
I love when you talk about, like, it's like eating healthy, where if you just, sometimes I'm like, I really want something sweet, I just eat a bunch of good stuff, and then there's just not enough room for the bad stuff, right? So you just fill, you don't try to solve all the problems as much as you just try to push more good stuff. Like, if you're right, drink a couple glasses of water before you have food, you'll probably eat less if your goal is to just keep filling your body with what it really, really needs. I think about when I was 16, this is a story, you guys don't know this. When I was 16, I had a Jeep CJ7, 1983, dark green, tan top, bigger tires, 33.5-inch tires, right? It was just like the coolest Jeep. But the one thing about me also is, like, I just hate things that don't work. I like things that rattle or whatever. So it's the worst car for somebody who has like OCD about things rattling, because the roof comes off. Everything rattles in this thing, right? It's just made of steel. And I had these, it would just rattle constantly, right? And it would just bug me when I would drive. And rather than trying to like shove cardboard or foam in to stop all the rattles everywhere around this Jeep, I just bought a bigger radio, right? I just bought bigger speakers. So that's the first time I learned at 16 years old that you can, if you want, you amplify what's good so you can silence what's not. That's really the spirit of, I think, this methodology is, let's double down on strengths. I mean, it works. It works, right? I just watched the whole Last Dance. I know I'm late to the party with the Michael Jordan story and the Bulls and, that whole team, but it's like, figuring out where people are amazing and everybody playing their position, playing their strengths, right? And that's so cool. Guys, can we go back for a moment? I'm going to go to this practicality piece of the assessment. I'm looking at mine right now. My top 3 are inspiration, tenderness, and fortitude. Inspiration, tenderness, and fortitude. And I want you to, if you can, give an example to everybody out there listening, like, regardless of what their top strengths are, Now, on my list, by the way, let me just give a little sample: inspiration, tenderness, fortitude, sensitivity, advisor, objectivity, organizer, zest, defender, trainer, gracious, stability. That's what my list is in order. But what would you tell somebody like me who has inspiration, tenderness, and fortitude about myself? What could I do with that information? And let's use that as a sample of what guys might learn about themselves and then how they might be able to do something with it. What's their strategy? What's the step that they take now that they know this about themselves? Who am I, guys?
You want me to take this one, or do you want to take it, Brandon?
You start, and then we'll tag team in.
Okay. You know, my initial instincts are keep doing what you're doing because you've already got such an incredible deep self-awareness. However, if you knew nothing about yourself, I would connect you to the stories, man, the stories of your life. I mean, the stories of like, I would ask you of times when you've really uh, brought out the best in someone, AKA a story like on the volleyball court, sand volleyball court with a guy. I don't know the guy's name. Maybe it could have been less. Um, who was, you know, who's not bad at volleyball, and yet every time I would do something good, somebody would say something nice, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you should see the other side of my game." And you come up to me with this, with tenderness, number two strength for you, inspiration, sensitivity, and you advise me, hey man, I just want you to know something. I've noticed that when somebody says something good to you, you have a really hard time with what's being said. You know, what could you do there to, you know, maybe, you know, just say, oh, thanks, man, and leave it at that, because you really are good. It's just taking those pieces and helping you begin to connect these dots to your story so that you can keep those at the forefront. I mean, it's the same thing you're doing with the pictures with your boys. It's you're taking pictures of moments where their strengths are shining, and you're making sure that those are always before them. And so I would bring out as many of those pictures of yourself and how these things are playing out. And then I wouldn't, I can't even speak. Technically, I wouldn't even focus that minute much on the bottom six, except for to say, where when I see the struggle that something maybe you bring up or bring to light that you're dealing with, and say, how can we manage these? How can we how can we take your strengths and maybe make your strengths shine on these efforts, these areas where maybe stability for you, for example, isn't necessarily your strongest, but fortitude carries with it some pieces of that stability factor that you can probably lean into. So it would just be connecting some dots so that you could maybe find alternative, use your tools to address the difficulties and challenges that you face in life, not the tools that are not necessarily your wheelhouse.
You know, in our band, Les, we did, and I think you know this, we did these 360 reviews. So for anybody, by the way, I'm using Front Row Dad lingo here. It's a band is a small group. Our group is 4 guys, and we did these reviews last year where we all wrote basically about each other, like what we saw in each other, blind spots, strengths, all that stuff. And I can see myself. I have a band practice tomorrow with Hal, Justin, and Tim, and I'm wondering if we all brought our parenting strengths from the book that we took at the retreat, and we said, where do you see me being these top 3? Can you help me to notice or see examples of where I've done this? And then that would get to what I think you just spoke about, right, Les? Like
Absolutely.
finding examples. And a lot of times, like, I think what's interesting about strengths is sometimes like you don't even know you're doing it because it comes so naturally to you that it might be difficult to even recognize it as a true strength or to value it as such.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's true.
Brandon, what are your thoughts?
So a couple keywords for you. So you motivate as a rule of life. I mean, if we look at your career, we look at the way that you're wired, you engage, you motivate, you want to see moving people to where they're to go. But deep underneath that is the love that you have, and you're very good at individualizing your love toward the ones you're directing it. And those two play hand in hand, because that motivation is then guided by, well, I have to motivate Tiger different than I do River, right? Those are the boys.
Ocean.
Ocean.
Same thing. Doesn't matter.
You
I have
know,
another
they feed
buddy
into the
who-
If we
same
had a
thing.
third boy, he would be named River for
I
sure.
have a buddy with a kid named River, so River Ocean. All right, so Tiger Ocean. So those boys are going to be loved different ways and motivated. Where your fortitude comes in, fortitude is all about perseverance. It's about stretch goals. It's about reaching, and that's your ethos. That you're constantly looking at what's that next place, and what tenderness does right in the middle of all that motivation and perseverance is it allows you to have that layer of compassion, that layer of concern, that layer of interest and relatability. So when you find that thread, when you find those threads and that tapestry they weave, that's already the hallmark of what's made you a successful dad. And now the question becomes, as you were saying with your band, all right, so how do I be better even at these? How do I align these so that I can start to see how they play? Because each one comes with a risk. Inspiration comes with a risk. You can overplay that inspiration to the point of, I'm not motivating you, I'm telling you, I'm directing you, and I'm losing sight of, as I had a coach that I was speaking to yesterday, works with coaches, professional, college, but all high level athletes. And she said, the one thing I wish I could tell parents is that their kids are not their trophies. It's the one thing I wish that they would hear from me, is their kids aren't their trophies. And inspiration has to watch that, because we can motivate and like, oh man, you're gonna look so good, and oh, you might make me look good. and that's natural. That's okay. That's healthy to acknowledge, like, all right, I need to tone that back. But your tenderness sits as such a great hedge for that. And so I feel like as you become more in tune with when they show, I think you can find that it will enhance that fortitude momentum that you'll naturally create.
Yeah. Did you guys notice anything at our retreat that was a common thread amongst when all the guys wrote their strengths, and then you had Brandon them hang them up on the wall, right? And was there anything that stood out there to you about our group, or like who Front Row Dads is, or who we tend to attract?
We had a ton of fortitude in that room.
Yeah.
That was a really common thread of just, we persevere, we long suffer, we don't give up, we maintain what we say we're going to do. And that fortitude strength, it comes with optimism, it comes with a positivity approach to it, but just there's a not quit there. And I have found that in every activity, from a fast I recently took with you guys and things I didn't even think I wanted to learn about that I'm learning about, and just that common thread that I have found among a lot of the guys that I meet in Front Row Dads.
Guys, what hasn't been said that needs to be said on this show?
Always a great question.
I think just the reality that good news dads, you all have strengths. You all have strengths. That whatever this assessment says or doesn't say, that I promise you they're in there. And there are times where we're so aware of what we're not and where we're failing, and we could see those so glaring, because that is the inherent negativity bias that we approach life with. It's what we were taught. It's institutionally how we parent, how we educate, and how we manage. Those three institutions lead with a negativity bias. So part of this shift that we're talking about with Incredible Parent and some of the references to Clifton Strengths is really shifting from negativity bias to strengths-based development. And that shift is something that, if it doesn't start here, if it doesn't start with turning down the volume on that self-critical voice, that harsh, you're not enough, you don't have what it takes, you're blowing it, to, no, that's not right. That's not true. That is not the whole story. It might be a chapter in the book. It could be a few pages in the book, but it's not the whole story. And that's something that we really hope to instill and empower you with, that they're there. We just got to find them.
Mm.
And I would say that one of the first places you can start in terms of exploring those is just the places that you can be grateful. Like anytime you can be grateful, you're going to uncover some strength in somebody, yes, and yourself. And so just reframing your world in that way, in a matter of saying, okay, oh, this is hard right now. Well, what's a different way that could be said, and doing so in such a way that influences one or two others. I think if we can just, especially during this time, if we can just find some way to connect with, a person a day, just to, I mean, whether it's your spouse, your kid, or even just sitting down alone and saying, here's what I'm really grateful for. I think that is such an important piece, to how we can begin at a basic level without an assessment, creating a different kind of world.
Guys, if the men out there are ready to take the assessment, figure out what their parenting strengths are, if they want to, and obviously this isn't just for dads. This is the Front Row Dads podcast, but this is a assessment for everyone who is a parent and
or grandparent.
I was going to say, arguably. I mean, yeah.
We've had all kinds. So whether you're a parent through foster, adoption, bio, your caregiving, you're a care provider, teacher, coach, so many ways that you can see these.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where do they go to get the book?
They go to incrediblefamily.com/Front Row Dads.
Awesome.
That's going to be the best, and anyone can go there, but the dad specifically, anybody who is a Front Row Dad, you can connect with myself or Brandon or John, and we will get you a code that will allow you to take the assessment at no charge. And that's an incentive for those of you out there right now that aren't Front Row Dads. You need to sign up, because we're not just going to be doing that, but we're looking at giving away at least one free coaching session. I actually talked to a coach today that has got a free 4-day program that could very well be something we are also instituting into this. So, and he's looking at becoming a Front Row Dad. So, by the way, respond to him, John.
Awesome.
He just sent something to you. But yeah, so I really do want as many Front Row Dads to jump on there and take their assessment if they haven't already done that, and we will get you that code. So get in touch with us.
It's awesome. Guys, this is a no-brainer. You got to get the book, do the assessment, talk about this. And even if you're not in Front Row Dads, take a buddy out for a walk, a cup of coffee, go sit in the sauna, do whatever, and talk about this. I mean, these are conversations that need to happen, right? These are conversations that, you want to grow your business, and you should grow your business, just not at the expense of your family and not at the expense of being a great dad. Like, we want to win at home and work, not sacrificing one. We need to focus on killing it in both places. This is incredible, guys. I'm pumped about it. I wish we could count how many times we've all said the word incredible on the show. It'd be funny. You should turn it into a drinking episode, everybody. Every time you hear the word. But guys, this is really amazing. Can you talk for a moment, by the way, about your experience with Front Row Dads, the Brotherhood specifically? Because Brandon, the reason I want you to talk about this is that, look, step one would be for somebody to buy the book, take the assessment, do the work, get some coaching, right? Become part of the Incredible Family organization. If you guys want to get really connected to Brandon and Les, they're in Front Row Dads. They're members of the group. Brandon was voted most influential person at our last retreat.
What?
Les has a tremendous amount of impact and influence, mostly on the volleyball court, but then again, in other areas as well. But all kidding aside, guys, can you just, even for 30 seconds, why did you say yes to Front Row Dads, the Brotherhood, and why are you still in it? Why are you committed to it?
So John and I met a year and a half ago with the launch of my first book. And as we were going through the interview, I began to ask him questions about the Brotherhood, and it resonated within me that a community of like-minded, like-hearted men that wanted to win, as he was just saying, at business and in life. And I'd reverse that. I want to win as a dad, and then I'd also love to be successful in business, because I feel like if I don't get the dad right, who cares what I did in business? Like that's my legacy. That's what lives beyond me. So to tribe up with a bunch of dudes going in the same direction with the pillars that are in place, and the way that not only are you encouraged, compelled, you're chided, you know, laughed with, but you get to pace yourself, but you can get around a band of dudes that you can trust, you can share with, you can grow with. And just, you know, recently completed a time with these guys. We did a fast at the start of the new year. And just to, you know, every day I would tune in to the little app where we were sharing comments. And I was so impressed how you could see guys that were further down the road and things like this, guys that were just starting, and the camaraderie, the encouragement. So for myself, this was a total fit. And I would encourage any dude that's looking for a place where you can feel connected with a band of guys wanting to go in the same direction. Front Row Dads is for you.
Thanks, dude. Les, how about for you?
For myself, I think the story goes as simple as I've known you for 2 years, and I knew that Front Row Dads was around from the get-go, but I thought my kids were too old, and which is hilarious that it would have anything that I would even think that it had to do with my kids. But and then somewhere along the way, we had a discussion. You're like, no, man, we need dads that are at all stages. And as soon as I realized that I would be valuable, first of all, to the community, that meant something to me, because I don't do anything without wanting to produce some sort of value. And so I was able to do that. But beyond that, man, it has given me more than I can even begin to say to be a part of the group, because so much of what Brandon just said, it's challenged me to be better personally for myself. And what I really love about it is it's not a bunch of dudes getting together, like wanting to show off their junk. And I mean that in the vulgar sense. They come together, and there's enough of that pushback and enough of that banter, but man, it is so much on the other end of that spectrum, where it's more encouragement than I've seen than you typically get in the world of males. It's more inspirational. It's more it's like guys are getting in touch with what it truly means to a male. Some would say that it's their feminine side, and I don't agree with that. I think it's us beginning to say, we have this within us to be somebody who can care and love each other, and even use those words. I mean, the fact that you say love you to guys all the time, and that I tell you I love you, that is something that is important to me, and guys need to hear that. And so I've really been just so impressed that, strangely, a community that is not a community of quote unquote faith has really had elements of faith stronger than a lot of the faith communities I've been a part of, that because we're connecting to something much deeper than something superficial, or the way it's promoted. It's truly a gift of just relationships. It's the ultimate expression of what it means to be in a relationship with God, to love your neighbor.
Yeah. Well said, Les. And thank you, Brandon. Guys, there it is. If you're watching the video, incredible parent. Go get the book. Annalyn and Brandon Miller, congrats to you, Brandon. And please pass along our congrats to your wife, who made a guest appearance earlier in the show, which is fantastic. I love that. I love
definitely
when kids,
the highlight of
wives,
the show.
families jump in, especially unexpectedly. Discover your parenting strengths and raise your kids with confidence. Incredibly important work. So grateful for this dialogue, gentlemen, and the fact that we're going to continue on. If you're out there listening and you're part of the Brotherhood, these two men are going to be on our training call in August later this year. As this show drops, the book is in full swing, momentum. Pick it up everywhere books are sold. Go to the website that Les mentioned earlier, which we'll also link to in the show notes at frontrowdads.com. We're going to be talking about this a lot. I've got a band meeting tomorrow. Like I said, I'm going to bring this up and talk about it with the boys. And this has been fantastic. I'm really grateful for both of you. And I mean that. Until next time, gentlemen, have a great day and a great week, and we'll talk soon.